Hello, everybody. Welcome to our session today, The Future of Common Knowledge. I'm so glad to be here with our guests today, Andreas Untereidig and myself. I'm Bianca Heldlo. I'm a researcher at the Weizmann Institute and teacher, researcher, professor at HSLU. This is the Lucerne University of Applied Arts in um, design, film, and art. Something like that. Yeah, I'm still new there. So and there we are colleagues, and I'm saying that because we have a long way back together of working on very similar topics that we are addressing today and questions. And with us are like Gemma Copeland, welcome, Renata Avila, so happy that you are here too, and Elisabeth Calderon-Lüning. And I want to introduce very briefly, not necessarily the topic, because we will discuss, we have like almost 2 hours today to dig into very important and emergent questions on um, open access, open knowledge, free knowledge, commons knowledge, and all this, what we also heard in the beginning of the conference and of the event. But maybe the humus from where we have been addressing those questions and different concepts is, yeah, we go back a long way together, actually several years. And the culmination was maybe 2022 with Renata Avila at the Weizenbaum conference. You give a keynote that is, I have to say, is still kind of was a transformative experience for me, and I started to look at things differently and ask and critically ask about my own research practices. And there, you have to know, everybody, that we are looking, Andreas and I, looking at those questions for a design research perspective. So it's of course very important for us also to understand where do we stand now? Why do we have to think about new epistemologies in our research and design practices? What is so pressing that we kind of have to reframe what we understand is research, or what is knowledge production? And from which perspectives do we want to look at? And one very promising came to being in my own practices, maybe to start to have a feminist approach to knowledge creation. And in a context today, maybe more a decolonial or even intersectional approach, intersectional feminist approach to ideas that who is creating knowledge, how do we handle knowledges, how do we even bring different knowledges together, which is a great design task, I would say, or a very normative stance within our design practices and design research practices. But then also like better understand how different knowledges can relate to each other. And this was a very nice presentation and performance we started the conference with. I also want to say that with Elisabeth, both of us, all of us, go also years back together in thinking about questions of digital literacy, of literacies in general, of digital sovereignty, and what it means not only in the political discourse, but in our, let's say, academic discourses that are very much informed by digital humanities, that are, yeah, looking very critically at the digital transformation and what it does to us, to our societies. And we have, of course, a lot of great, or I don't know, great is the wrong word, but we have new geopolitical arrangements or shifting geopolitical arrangements where we, again, are very much challenged to look differently at power dynamics within knowledge production, to look differently at what means knowledge for democracy today. And I'm very, very much looking forward to your inputs. But before that, Andreas will introduce you. I just briefly prepare the terrain, so to say.
Thanks, Bianca. Good morning also from my side. I'm gonna maybe build with 2 or 3 words on what Bianca already said, because I think it's interesting to also think about why these conversations that we're having are so timely. Because of course in recent weeks and months we saw not only in developments in the United States just how fragile the infrastructures are that we have to build and disseminate knowledge, but even the most powerful universities are crumbling in the first instance and are being reshaped by what those in power seem to be deeming as legitimate decisions about what kind of topics are being explored, who gets to research them, speak at all. Everything shifts along political lines. But of course, it's also in this moments of fracture and collapse that something else becomes possible, or maybe seem more plausible. And because I think when cracks appear, then there's spaces opening up for other practices. And that's exactly what we wanna look at today and explore. On the one hand, how asymmetries of power continue to shape the production and circulation of knowledge, who gets to speak, who decides what's visible, what forms of knowing are recognized. On the other hand, though, also we want to ask what kind of alternative infrastructures and epistemologies and collective practices might be productive in this context. And we are very lucky to have 3 fantastic panelists here that are not just observing these dynamics and analyzing, understanding them, but also intervening them and building more just and inclusive knowledge systems. So first we're going to hear from Renata Avila, a human rights and technology lawyer, currently the CEO of the Open Knowledge Foundation. Renata's work spans legal advocacy, digital rights, open data, AI governance. She litigated on behalf of whistleblowers and Nobel laureates, worked closely with Tim Berners-Lee, and now also sits on several important advisory boards shaping global tech policy, from Lacuna Fund to the Whistleblower Network in Germany. So what we hear from Gemma Copeland. She's a designer, researcher, organizer, educator based out of London. She's a founding member of Common Knowledge, a not-for-profit workers co-op that supports social movements through design and technology. And also sits on the board of Workers.coop, UK-based or UK-wide federation of workers cooperatives. Her own practice centers on exploring how design can be used to enable people to organize, to build support structures, and collectively to imagine post-capitalist futures. And finally, our dear friend Elisabeth Calderon-Lüning, mission lead for democracy and future technologies at the Democratic Society, and with a focus on democratizing digital infrastructures and co-designing what she calls democracy in the loop approaches to AI. Previously, she worked as researcher at University of the Arts and here at the Weizmann Institute, and also the Royal Institute of Technology in Stockholm. So welcome everybody again. We're super happy and grateful that you're here. And we plan to run the session in a way that we first hear from the 3 panelists with short inputs, 15 to maximum to 20 minutes maybe. And after that, we open the space for discussion. And we invite you to also join early, so it doesn't have to be that we wait for everybody to talk and then we do a Q&A. So if anything resonates with you or challenges you, you have questions, then feel free to raise your hand and join the conversation. And that is it. So let's get started. Renata,
let's get started. With no further introduction, I just want to say that I feel very happy to be here. I lived for a while here in Berlin, and it is home of so many interesting creatures, I will say. Like, you know, like it's a special place, you know, like in here, I will need, like, you know, 15 coffee breaks to manage to catch up with all of you and hear what you are doing. And each conversation is amazing. And I take so much when I come here by meeting people and by discovering what are you up to. But also it's a little bit like, it's challenging. You know, when I come to speak in Berlin, I cannot improvise. I have to prepare because you are one of the most challenging audiences. And this talk, in a way, is a call for we defend this, and we need to defend being like that, and we need to defend being different and thinking different ideas and being able to gather together and discuss them. And I am afraid that in many European cities, I don't know, I know that in Latin America it's completely different, but in many European cities, it was taken for granted, you know. It was taken for granted that we will always have access to libraries, that we will always have a way to defend the way we access information and what information is accessible, and that we will always have, like, you know, counterweights to these power grabs that we are seeing. The reality is that the most democratic region in the world is being challenged as never before in the last 5 years, I will say. Everything has changed. And it is scary, you know, because I call it like the Guatemalization of Europe, because many of the patterns that I grew up with are present here now. And it is like not nice to see, because the complex, those are, like, you know, in Latin America, in many countries, in countries like mine, the complexity of the problems now is even worse. So it is kind of things that were very localized and now global. And it is related to the topic that, I'm sorry that I started that way, but it is like, you know, an urgent call on defending something that you have and defending something that is so vital that cannot slip away. And it is very interesting. I grabbed the title from Extinction Rebellion in the UK, because, I mean, it took 40 years for the people fighting for climate justice to get our attention. 40 years of activism, of small activism, of being ignored, and so on. So in the case of this knowledge extinction, the infrastructures to access knowledge, as we know, we cannot, I mean, it is so urgent that we cannot wait 40 years for that kind of activism to take off. And it's not, if we go to open knowledge, it's even more pressing. And we have, you know, it's 4 crises basically that we are facing in defending our open knowledge. The first one is political. And the political one, it was at the beginning, it was heavily influenced by industry, you know, like remember the first cases of the photocopies and how we will be like chased if we copied. You can only copy 5 pages, you cannot copy like 6 pages. And it was when we were going to the cinema, there was like, I remember there were like this, if you copy this, if you pirate this movie, you will be to prison and sent to Gulag, basically. Like I remember growing up with that. And you have seen how it shifted, right? How it shifted to absolute permissible grabbing, taking all you can, and don't be punished for it if you are powerful enough. And I mean, in this conversation, who owns free knowledge is also who is the custodian of the free knowledge that the open, accessible knowledge that we have. And for example, I was 2 weeks ago in a conversation with some private conversation on the European Commission, and someone was explaining how, you know, like the big companies are like absolutely free riding on the commons. And the custodian has the, you know, like the tension of, do I become closed so as to defend myself from the freeloaders? But what would be the cost of becoming closed? The other political thing that has happened is that communities are more reluctant to share and to open. It is like, okay, if I open, I will be abused. And that political conversation is becoming very difficult when I'm discussing with, you know, young researchers in Africa, Latin America, in the South. It's like, you know, we don't get anything out of the sharing. Like, you know, the benefits of us sharing primary research that is very expensive to gather, that sometimes is even risky to gather. It's not, you know, it is, are we going to take a political position of being closed because there's no reciprocity? It's like more of an extraction rather than an exchange. That's another political thing that has is threatening, you know, like the sharing of open knowledge. And of course, there's a big political picture. One of the things in Open Knowledge Foundation, we keep an international network, and We had members from Ukraine, and we had members from Ukraine and from Russia. Before the war, like it was quite good collaboration because both countries were like, united against, corruption basically. And they were even, exchanging a lot of information on procurement, on some contracts, on some movements of money. And the sad thing is that, like the same way that conflicts and wars and in this new multipolar context hit economy and hit cultural exchanges, it goes for information. It's one of the first casualties that goes. And one of the things that was impressive to me is how they really rushed both in collaboration to save data sets. They had the same thing that is going now in the US, it happened then. I remember that we were trying to basically exile the data that they had that was very precious data that will serve in the post-war in Ukraine and in the post-war in Russia to hold those with the money and the power accountable. But it was something that really nobody was prepared to that. There were no protocols, there were no ways, there were no we didn't have not the rescue teams that you have when a natural disaster happen, when there's a knowledge disaster happening and a data disaster happening. We didn't have. Now we are more prepared, and I will talk about it. But it was very interesting to see how a political situation can trigger. Now is very tangible, as we have seen how terabytes of research, precious research, are being deleted in the US. Then it's planetary, and it's something that I am exploring more and more, the interlink of planet extinction and knowledge extinction. It is not only that when we lose a species, or when there's floods destroying physical archives, that we lost a lot. A lot, is quite evident, okay, a bird no longer exists, and all the knowledge tied to that species is gone. But it's how it is affecting deeply the ecosystems of knowledge, of traditional knowledge. For example, in my country, people growing different kinds of corn, new more or less, at this time, there's a famous ant, big, so actually we eat it, that used to appear every May. And by the time that this ant will appear, the agriculture people will know how to do certain procedures. But now, because climate change and all the alterations in environment, that comes now, and it's March, and the ant is out. And so, how are the massive, the speed of the planetary disruptions are disturbing so much the traditional knowledge that without the assistant of the new knowledges, it will be very costly and difficult for them to catch up. For example, the only way that we could fix that situation is a combination of a knowledge commons on climate and the local knowledge. For example, having the agriculture people in the indigenous communities taking care of crops, pair with some people modeling the data to fast forward. It needs to be a symbiosis of traditional knowledge and the tools to speed up the unique understanding that they have of their environment to adapt to update to the situation today. Technological I think that is the most visible threat to the people that work in our space, and is this enclosure of the commons, of course. They not only the big tech not only grabbed all they could, all that was digitized, this is like a vacuum cleaner, absorbing, sucking all the data available. But now they want to put, well, they have already locked. We cannot know what is inside the systems. I mean, even if they claim to have open models, we cannot know what fed the system. We cannot open the box to put what we think is missing. And I am afraid that, like you have seen how our interaction when we search for vital information has had decay. I have a very little daughter, and it was one of my most shocking experiences to see how vital information is buried and how you cannot access critical information that you thought I was, again, like the naivete, taking things for granted, thinking that they would be available. And it is very interesting because as part of many things that I do, I train people from the United Nations that are on the ground in operations. And one of the things that they want to know in the recent courses is, how do we interact with generative AI, and how can we incorporate it to our work? And as you see, like one of the threats is they come from different countries, from very, very varied set of countries. And it's very interesting because one of the things that they do is they ask specific things. One of the exercises is to ask to 4 different, of these generative AI platforms, specific things locally. And in most of the cases, there's not enough information, like they are hallucinating the information about vital things having in countries in conflict. So the technological crisis that we are seeing is that people in positions of power will take decisions based on hallucinations, basically. As research institutions' funding is cut or is never put in this pool of knowledge because of a paywall system and so on. And I can go deeper in the technological and the enclosure of the enclosure of the enclosure and the commodification of low quality knowledge. The design is so broken that it is one of the most present threats. And the other part is the homogenization of knowledge. And I think that education, especially primary education, is at the major risk. Like if you think how beautiful the presentation of the keynote was, and how he explained that the double death, of the content, like when I think there's a triple death, because now we are killing the content again, the living object again, by completely erasing it from systems. And then there's the economic, because the barriers and it is quite evident everywhere in all the efforts of the open knowledge efforts have been defunded, deprioritized, and forgotten, basically. I understand, like in many countries, people need to eat, but I have also seen how all these digital transformation initiatives, which are not other thing than hidden privatizations, all the money is going to that. All the money is going to adopt senseless AI systems to improve bureaucracy, and nothing is going to the archives, and nothing is going to, like to local knowledge being digitized and out of the box forms to create or recreate our knowledge commons. So moving fast, I know that I'm taking a lot of time, but and the other thing is that who owns free knowledge is not only about ownership, it's about who is gatekeeping the knowledge. And I'm also very afraid of something, and it is something that it has happened so many times in history that, and I'm seeing it happening again, there's certain type of knowledge that is very inconvenient for those in power that we have access to. And you have seen it in the US, books removed from libraries. We have seen it in digital form, books being indexed. And that's just in a country. And in a country like more or less functioning. At a larger scale, I wonder, we don't have a mechanism yet. I mean, we have fragmented mechanisms in libraries here and there. But in one unified platform, we risk that the most explosive, the kind of content that gives you the hints on how to, remove the powerful from power, that kind of dissident content, that kind of you know, explosive content that will make people aware that that you know, of grave injustices. I'm not sure if that is in the interest of those you know, coding the very sophisticated AI systems that will become the mediators in the way that we access knowledge, will become the ones picking which pieces of information to feed you. I don't think it's in the best interest that that content is digitized and included in these systems. And the power to the index, to erase content, to just make it so difficult to get there is a power that is, like, I am afraid, embedded in the systems that are mediating knowledge today. And then, you know, like there's small efforts, small AI models and efforts here and there. But then I am finding the environment very hostile to sharing. Like, you know, like people want to create great things and keep them not locked, but keep there's new enclosures by the communities to defend themselves. So, and also the reality is that we had 20 years ago, when even more, when I started, like, you know, my activism around the topics, we had big illusions, and it became a big disillusion, you know, like in a sense that with the technology today, key knowledge should and could and should be available to far many. Even the open access movement, you know, if you really analyze critically the results, they are not necessarily benefiting the people that initially intended to help. And quality of education didn't improve in the last, and so with the tools that we had, we did so little in the last 20 years. So it is difficult because, you know, like the priority in many countries was to connect, but to what? And what the people in many countries connecting for the first time. I mean, we need to understand that 40% of the population globally doesn't have access to internet yet. Is to an experience. What are we going to connect them to? Like, what the corporations will, you know, like push that even, oh, don't worry, we train this bot with Wikipedia. But like the experience for the person interacting with digital, instead of entering possibilities of creation and access to the knowledge that they are interested in, is becoming one way, and it's becoming so closed, and it's becoming so controlled that it is, when we talk about open knowledge today, it is either like a promise that hasn't delivered yet, or a mirage. And lastly, you know, I think that we need to, one of the things that struck me is, I think that we need to really call for a knowledge rebellion. I think that we need to really fight this politically and have a very specific agenda with very specific points. You know, one of the points is we really need to defend the budgets. Second, we need to push the boundaries. And I think that second, of pushing the boundaries, is the most important thing, because I think that we, in the open movement, we were too nice. We were always asking for permission. We were always going the long way of compliance. You know, we were always trying to make everybody happy, make the private sector happy, make the public sector happy, make the content industry happy. And I think that a little bit like grabbing examples from the environmental movement, it's not time for niceness. It's time of priorities and urgencies. And I think that we are in the perfect moment to push those boundaries, because the content industry is no longer chasing the girl that came to photocopy, like, you know, 10 pages. We really could push the boundaries for legal mechanisms and social mechanisms to preserve and advance the knowledge commons that we dreamt of 20 years ago. I think that the political moment is right. I think that there's a small opening in all this gray area of what the AI companies are doing. And I think that one of the other things that we need to really push is that knowledge that is key to solve the most pressing problems of our times goes and is shared to the largest extent as soon as possible. That's all of the things that we could push. I mean, we could really push for an agenda that questions copyright, that questions paywalls, that questions this system of segmenting knowledge only for the few. And I think that in conversations that in all the conversations that we are going to have today, we could be like in a more firm position to say, we want more and we want it now. And is that determination that will, like, guarantee that it is, like, our knowledge commons are harder to be abused, are more resilient to when we have attacks, and like at least we are fighting, and we are not just seeing the decade pass by in front of our eyes. So we need to rebel. We need to reclaim as well what is ours. But the other thing is that we need to rebuild. And that takes me back to that conversation that we had 3 years ago. We need to imagine different forms and infrastructures for our knowledge commons. We cannot fix what is so broken. We cannot fix DeepSeek, ChatGPT. We cannot fix X. We need to really start rebuilding the places and the architectures on how we are going to preserve and share the knowledge commons. So those who are now reluctant to share, trust that space again, and those who are and those pieces of content at risk of disappearance can find a way not into the exploitative system, but into our new forms of sharing. We need to revisit peer-to-peer. We need to revisit models, even radical models as Sci-Hub, what if and how could we, come to have a federated commons that will allow us to access knowledge, advanced knowledge, without extracting from one to benefit the few. So that's my provocation. I look forward to write that manifesto on the concrete points. And I hope that that urgency stays with you, and that you feel like very unsettled about the idea of not being able to access things that you were completely able to access yesterday. So thank you.
Wow, yeah, thank you so much, Renata. Thanks for this strong insights, strong questions, and also strong statements and positioning in a way what we have to do. I wanted to ask if you have direct questions right now, please feel open to raise your hand. If not, we are going to the next input from Gemma.
Yeah, firstly, thank you so much for having me here today. It's so inspiring to hear you speak also. Like, there were so many threads in there that I just want to pick up on. So I'm excited for the conversation. Yeah, I'll just do a brief kind of introduction to my work and some of the things that we're talking about. So I'm here today on behalf of my co-op called Common Knowledge, and we build digital infrastructure for social movements. We're a not-for-profit worker co-op of technologists, designers, and facilitators. So we have 7 members that are we govern ourselves non-hierarchically and democratically within a kind of flat structure, because we really believe that how we kind of create technology influences what we make. So for us, this project is not just about, building these tools, but kind of looking at all aspects of our work, how we work together and how we collaborate with others, and doing this in a kind of democratic and liberatory way. So we work with grassroots organizers and communities around the world, and we use our digital expertise to help them build power and kind of achieve their political goals. And yeah, we design and build digital technology to kind of multiply their impact and capacity. So the challenge that we, I guess, set up to address is that the wider political challenge is that social movements around the world are kind of fragmented along single issue lines. And we feel that so far we haven't been able to kind of present a legitimate contest to the ruling hegemony. It feels that by being fractured in this way, like our capacity and our ambitions are not matching the right, we are really losing. And so we're interested in how you can kind of use models of the commons and working together and taking a kind of movement ecological approach to become more powerful. And our kind of specific slice of this problem is around technology because that's our background. We definitely don't think that it's the answer in itself. We don't see technology as a silver bullet in any way. It's just what we happen to do. And for us, the kind of the problem with technology in relation to social movements is that capitalism does not care about movement needs. And so the technology that's developed within capitalism is all about kind of securing profit and sustaining the current economic system. And so the digital tools then that organizers use are not fit for purpose. They're either, organizers appropriating consumer technology like the Google Suite to try to make it fit into their own needs. And there are all these problems around that in terms of surveillance and security. Or there's specific political technology that's developed generally in the US context because that's where the money is. And it's really focused on electoral races. And often it's all about broadcasting or mobilizing members rather than kind of deep, slow relational work. Or you have smaller projects that are built with the best intentions, but often by volunteer labor, which can be unreliable. You don't have that kind of central institutional point to go back to. So people burn out or kind of disappear or get involved in other projects, which means that you have these kind of tech tools that become unusable after a few years. And you have organizers that don't kind of control the tools that they're using. So the question that we ask ourselves with Common Knowledge is how can we leverage the power and ubiquity of digital technology, because we do think that it can be very powerful to facilitate grassroots organizing. And our interest is really in grassroots organizing, like bottom-up change. So we're interested in how we can, really empower people to directly participate in politics themselves, build relationships, organize themselves, address problems themselves. We think that people know their own context best and that it's more about, empowering people rather than telling them what to do. Our name is Common Knowledge because we really want these methodologies and ways of working. Like we want it to be entirely obvious how you unionize your workplace, or how you kind of set up a food co-op, or how you set up a mutual aid network, so people can just do it themselves and not wait for someone to come around and save them or tell them what to do. So we really want to kind of shift how technology is created and used to bring it back into community hands. And so our work, we see digital technology as one part of it, but a big part of our work is also in building community, so stewarding, convening, making sure that people are working together and talking to each other. We feel that we have, through our work, because we work with a diverse range of organizations across the movement ecology, so this is addressing different issues, whether that's climate justice or workers' rights or migrants' rights, and also different kind of forms, so unions and research institutions and direct action organizations. So in some ways, this is a unique role and a privilege to be able to work with so many different groups. And so then as much as possible, if we see problems that are shared or shared strategies or that kind of thing, we're trying to make sure that people are then speaking to each other and kind of sharing their strategies, sharing their tools, like trying to be this kind of connective tissue between these different groups. Yeah, for example, we're next month convening a movement infrastructure assembly in London, where we're getting lots of different groups that are either directly working on different political issues or providing the kind of infrastructure and support for these. So whether that's funders or other technologists or, architects, spaces, a broad range of kind of support organizations, and basically getting them in a room together and asking, what do you need, what do you have, and kind of facilitating those exchanges between the movement. And then another core part of our work is training. So it's not enough to just build new digital technology in order to meet problems, but people have to know how to use the tools that they have. So often, if an organization comes to us with a problem, we won't necessarily say, oh, we should build a new tool to kind of address this, but we'll look at what they're doing already, the infrastructure that they have already. Can it already solve their problems if we just kind of train them to use it better or fix small parts of it? And a big side of this is also maintenance as well. Like I feel this is something within digital technology, particularly, I guess, the kind of mainstream technology where it's all about things being new and faster and better, and not thinking about how to fix things and how to work with what we have already. So yeah, we do a kind of broad range of work, whether that's building one-off websites, building maps, sometimes just using off-the-shelf tools, but doing research and developing content, for example, like on how to run a workers' inquiry, sometimes apps or visual communication, so kind of creating open source replicable identities for social movement groups. And yeah, just to kind of talk briefly about one of our main focuses at the moment is a product called Mapped. And so Mapped is our attempt to address problems that we've seen consistently over our past 7 years of operating, working with different groups, and address these problems rather than on one-off projects through shared infrastructure for the movement. So over the years, many organizations have come to us asking for maps of their membership to kind of show power, almost as like a propaganda tool when they're working on a campaign. All these people have signed up to this petition, they're taking action. Sometimes the maps so people can self-organize groups. So for example, in the 2019 election, we worked with a group called Momentum to make a map where people could kind of join others who were going canvassing in marginal constituencies, or like find carpooling or organize other events like that. So it's really facilitating this kind of direct self-organization. And the tool is just there as a way of kind of connecting people and providing this central hub. So with Mapped, it connects to common organizing tools. We really wanted to, with this, not start from scratch, like, oh, we have to design and build an entire CRM, because there were plenty of tools out there, and while not perfect, did the job well enough, and the kind of technical debt and the amount of time it would take to migrate people to a new tool, it didn't seem like it was worth the energy. So instead, Mapped is a tool that works on top of other tools that really focuses on interoperability. So it connects to things like Action Network or MailChimp or Airtable, these common tools that organizers use to maintain their membership database and to communicate with their members. And so it pipes this in and then adds other data sources to that. So we're creating this kind of ongoing movement library where so we have census data, political data. It's all very UK based at the moment. custom data sets that different organizations have contributed themselves based on their own research. And so organizers can then augment their membership data with these other data sets. So you can see, okay, I have members in this constituency, here's the previous election results from many different elections, here's demographic data, deprivation data, you know, custom polling data, etc. And so you're then able to kind of have much more, I guess, high definition and strategic insights into where your members are and what you can do with that. It then, as well as augmenting these CRMs, it then has visualization tools like you can see here. And this kind of came out of many conversations with organizers where they just literally said, we don't know where our people are, we can't see them. And we think that there's really a power in it being able to kind of visualize membership and visualize power and geographic distribution. And a lot of this is around, you know, it's giving that top-down picture, yes, but it's about facilitating people to then be able to go on the ground and build relationships to go canvassing. So there's really like this link between the top down and the bottom up again, like understanding things from a more national level, but then being able to kind of drill down into the local level as well. And yeah, I guess a really core part of our work, I think, is the connection between the offline and the online. We see digital tools as a step to get people in a room together, basically, and it's just the first step. We definitely don't see it as the entirety of political organizing. So for example, this screenshot here is a map that we have been working on using this map tool with an anti-fascist organization in the UK, because the far right party is also becoming stronger and stronger, currently polling at far higher than all the mainstream parties, so which is kind of terrifying. And so with this, they can look at polling data for support for reform, the far right party, overlaid with where their members are. So they can kind of understand where are high risk areas, where do we have people, where do we need to get on the ground and like start building power in these areas, and who are the people that are already there that we can kind of directly talk to and say like, okay, you need to get out into your street and like local community and start talking to people as well. Yes, I ended up saying all that. And so the way that we developed Mapped as well, we tried to apply the same cooperative and non-hierarchical organizing methods that we use internally within our cooperative through the co-design process as well. So we made a cohort of organizers who we work with, who actually work in our same building, and then kind of connected with other allied organizations in order to develop the design specification and work out what to work on. And so we started this with getting everyone in a room, in a digital room in this case. So this was before the last election in the UK, and we literally just got the organizers to lay out like, what's your plan for the election? What's your strategy? Everyone kind of shared what they were doing and talked about what their needs were. And then we started to bring them together and look at, okay, what are the shared needs? What are we all working on that would benefit from shared infrastructure? We then made a series of propositions of like, oh, we could build something like this or like this. And then together with them prioritized it based on like, you know, what's the easiest or like quickest to do that will make the most impact in all of your campaigns. And we got the organizers then to vote on what we should focus on. And one of the things that we found really interesting about this process was consistently people would vote on the features and the tools that would have the most benefit to the most organizations rather than the things that would benefit their organization the most. And so it was really this idea of movement generosity in action. Like people really want to take this commons approach, and I think people really see the power in that as well. And so at the moment we're continuing to develop design specifications in this way of thinking about how we can kind of build on the infrastructure and create new features. And we're doing this in collaboration with a whole range of different organizations, making propositions and then co-bidding for funding. I think the kind of funding economic model of this is also a really interesting side, because we're also trying to take the same commons approach. A lot of, well, all the organizations we work with are primarily funded through grant funding or membership dues. And building shared infrastructure together is a way of kind of pooling that money and time and energy within the movement, rather than it kind of scattering into a million different software as a service model products. And so through this kind of co-research that we're doing with different organizers to work on this platform, we're really asking, like, how can the tools enable specific organizing methodologies? We're trying to center the entire design on the political organizing needs rather than what we want to do as technologists, I would say. And then specifically, how can we build wins across movement causes? So taking a movement ecological approach and looking at ways that we can strengthen the movement as a whole. One example of this in the kind of how the, I guess, technological side reflects this movement ecological approach is we built with mapped abilities to share data between organizations securely, where they have lots of controls about, so they could share their entire data source, but with different things hidden if they wanted to, with specific organizations, or they can share filtered subsets of their data. And this was used in the last election, where 3 different climate organizations were able to share information on events together through the platform. So again, it's like using this commons platform as a way of kind of facilitating this like movement collaboration. And yeah, this diagram from Shock Doctrine of the Left is illustrating this kind of movement ecological approach. So there are all these different methodologies: healing, building, smashing, and taming. And we're trying to look at ways that through infrastructure we can strengthen all these different approaches and make sure everyone's kind of working together, and this, yeah, it feeds into each other to become stronger and ultimately more powerful. And yeah, that's it.
Thanks so much, Gemma. I'm a total fan of your work, and I think it's so important to really go down to the swamps of infrastructure and also introduce this idea of this, of maintaining the ties between those organizations. Any questions so far? Any questions for Gemma?
A very, very quick question. Maybe you mentioned it, but in terms of data security, when you're doing these tools, what are sort of the thoughts or the things you could put into place? I mean, you said one thing, that organizations themselves can decide what data they share, but how do you ensure sort of data security when it is membership data that we're talking about?
That's a good question. So one thing that we do with the membership, their locations, we're on the map showing like a kind of fuzzy location of them as well. And sharing data between organizations at the moment, we don't have kind of private, so like names and phone numbers and that kind of thing. So it's more that when they're sharing between organizations, that it's getting a sense of, in this constituency, like we have, 200 members, and more this kind of power rather than the like personal details.
Thanks. A question about common knowledge itself. Just mentioned it's a cooperative, so you can share a little bit what does it entails and how it works.
Yes. Yeah, so we're a not-for-profit worker cooperative. So there are 7 of us. We operate in a flat structure, so everyone feeds into the governance of the organization as a whole. We rotate responsibility for everything between us. So different people will kind of run different aspects of the co-op for about 6 months at a time. We use something called sociocracy to govern ourselves and make decisions. And that's, yeah, a method of making decisions based on consent rather than consensus. And that really focuses on kind of continuous iteration and learning. So anyone can propose something to the rest of the group of like, I think, you know, our collective should change this thing about the way that we work together. You discuss it, people voice critical concerns. If not, it kind of moves ahead. And often you set a time in the future to kind of review it. So yeah, I mean, I could go on and on about the kind of governance structure, but for me, it's been a really interesting thing to be a part of over the last, 6, 7 years. Because it's really this like living organism that we're kind of creating together. When we started, there were 3 of us, and over time, like as we've grown, the most interesting thing is that each person brings such a different perspective and takes the co-op in such a different direction that like you could never understand, like never predict beforehand. And yeah, so it becomes this real exercise, I think, in like emergence and again, like kind of creating a commons through the organizational structure. I think as well, though, one important learning from the last couple of years is there's so much beauty in the openness of it, of giving control to the other people who join the organization. But the flip side of this, and I think it's like one of Eleanor Estrom's like principles of the common, is that we have to also be very careful of what the boundaries are and who we let in, because when we have had problems with people joining, it's really been like almost like catastrophic for the co-op. And so there has to be this like connection between openness and like empowering people to just do what they want with the organization, but also protecting the organization and what we're creating together.
Great. I think we should go to the next input, but thank you so much. And then please remember your question for the discussion afterwards. Thanks so much. It's again so strong, and it relates so much to what you said, Renata, because it's emphasizing on local practices and the situatedness of knowledge also, and in the context of communities, caring communities, supportive communities. And this is something that we take with us very strongly. And your talk and your input is going in a very similar direction. Maybe not. Elisabeth.
Yeah, you know, sometimes when you realize that you just entered a different bubble than your own. And just for me right now, after listening to both of you, you I've of course known for a while and followed your thoughts, and I just realized, wow, I've left that bubble somehow. Like I've entered into this other bubble, which is like democracy practitioner bubble, where I'm trying to feed in some kind of critical digital thinking within that field. And it's in a very different spectrum, I think, of where you guys are, which is, it's been just super, super great to listen to you, because I'm gonna make this intro very long now, but so when I started working with anything digital, I was co-hosting, let's say, community gardens and things like this here in the city. And we started a project, Andreas and I, and this was about how to create, like, what does technology look like when you design it and develop it from the neighborhood up? So this connects a lot. And I just feel like, wow, how did I land so far away from that thinking? And I feel very re-energized and re-radicalized, I think, to go back to the work that I'm doing. So it's going to be very different talk right now. So also aesthetically very, very different. When do I press this? Yeah. So I work for an organization based in Brussels, an international NGO or association called the Democratic Society. It's existed now soonish for 20 years. And we work with, or how we started as an organization was to advocate for and create citizen assemblies, different new formats of citizen participation with government. And that was, of course, 20 years ago, a pretty difficult thing to do. And I think now we've reached like at least a mainstream understanding of what we mean with citizen participation. In the coalition agreement that came out yesterday of the German government, it even exists in that kind of, I can imagine, very difficult conversation that was held between those two parties. So this is the realm that I'm working in, and I'm going to go extremely off script here, but yeah, we call this democratic innovation, which is, of course, a little bit this innovation word that is probably going out of everybody's ears right now. But this idea of that we need new processes, new tools to participate beyond elections and to make decision-making and political decision-making much stronger, grounded in the people that have to live with these decisions, so to say. And here, the digital has, of course, come in to play, and now even more so with AI, because there is like this idea and wish to institutionalize these kinds of practices, but it's been difficult because they're very time consuming and they're very resource intensive and they cost a lot and so on and so forth. So AI comes into this mix and says like, well, we're going to solve this. We can scale anything. We can make it in any language. Everybody can participate with large language models. It's going to be such a blast. And this is so a little bit the work that I've been doing now from this very, very narrow perspective, right? Of looking at what happens when you bring in and here, bring in AI into these kinds of processes and into democracy as a whole, because something we do a lot is we work a lot with municipalities and governments that want to do these kinds of things, right? And not only these kinds of participatory processes, but also like digitalizing and AI-izing their public services a lot. So there are questions there of like what do we have to think about and so on and so forth. And this is, of course, a very difficult conversation because democracy is not made, it's not a systemized that's, it's not a system that is optimized for speed. It's not supposed to be fast. It's supposed to be slow, to be able to hold disagreement, slow things down, allow time for collective sense-making, and the very structure of our democratic institutions with separations of powers and checks and balances and so on. These are all deliberate friction points in the democratic system that are made for this to not go fast and not be super efficient, because slowing it down prevents us from making hasty decisions and opens up for different life worlds and so on and so forth. And also to foster creativity and what we, to be able to think about what kind of possible futures we have. So when tech meets this, these two ideas, of course, don't really combine well. And another thing is that these technologies also promise a very smooth experience. So it's a very seamless experience where it can be through a really nice interface and things go really quickly and information or knowledge is shared. And this, I think we should also talk about what we mean with knowledge actually. But these types of design often reduce citizens, of course, to users and removing their agency to challenge, reinterpret. Sorry? Please. Thank you. Yeah, so that we see that the deliberation is not like a UX problem to be solved, but it's actually a democratic practice to be protected. Next slide. So friction doesn't just slow things down, it also creates spaces for new kinds of thinking through civic research and civic design, through protests, through design inquiry or grassroots movements. Communities are experimenting with how problems are defined and not just how they're solved. And these aren't the bugs in the democracy, these are the features. So when we design systems that value friction, we enable citizens not just to respond to the questions, but actually to create their own questions. And as I said, so this, yeah. No problem. No, you can. So as I said, now AI is coming into this this field of democratic innovation. It's going to solve all of these problems that the institutions have of trying to institutionalize these kinds of practices, but maybe not the people, the citizens in the room. And yeah, next. And a project that we're doing right now, which is an Horizon funded project. So probably explains a little bit the language, is called Knowledge Technology for Democracy. And it's looking at first of all, how can we see AI as in the history of other knowledge technologies, of how this is going to change the way we communicate within democracy, but also to look specifically in how can we harness, as it says so nicely, how can we harness the benefits of AI for civic participation and not only the risks. So this was like the task at hand, right? And what we did as Digital Democracy Lab, as Democratic Society, thank you, was to create the Digital Democracy Lab and also design the Digital Democracy Demonstrator. And both of these things are part of the same kind of, it's two parts of the same whole. And it's not trying to be any kind of AI-driven governance solution, but actually just a research tool to design to understand better AI's role in democratic deliberation. The lab itself is structured as a deliberative process, as a deliberative mini-publics of people discussing in a room on a key societal issues, while at the same time critically examining how AI can support or hinder democratic conversations. And the demonstrator platform is a digital platform that integrates a large language model into the deliberation process, allowing us to observe how AI-generated content influence democratic discussions. And so both of these things do not aim to optimize democracy. Instead, they're helping us to explore this kind of complexities in between those tensions. And so the goal is not efficiency, but actually deliberative depth. To design this, which was very difficult because, as I said before, I come from this very like there is nothing to gain here. We should definitely not engage with AI. It was very difficult to try to design any kind of positive view of this, but what we ended up doing was to think around what kind of design principles we think should be there while we are trying to design and then develop this tool. Of course, transparency, which is like a given. It was very important for us, since this was going to be in a deliberative setting, that the agency of the participants, so that their engagement with the technology was they engaging over the technology, not the other way around. And then something that we called like deliberative slowdown. So we're not looking for speed, we're not looking for seamlessness, we're looking for friction. The technology itself should create moments where we have to stop and ask, is this what we want the technology to be doing? And we call this democracy in the loop approach to AI development. And it stems, of course, from human in the loop and society in the loop approach to AI development. Human being having some kind of human oversight, society in the loop being trying to embed social value systems into the AI, where we say that democracy in the loops needs to, not only in the development phase of the technology, but in the using phase of the technology, also allow us to criticize what kind of value systems it's basing its outputs on, what kind of data sets it's basing its outputs on, and to be able to change them. And since we're doing this for a deliberative setting, this is not something that every person does by themselves, but this is something that we negotiate democratically within that room. We tested this in 4 cities in Europe now last fall, so October, November. It was with policymakers and industry and software developers, but also in Krakow and Madrid with citizens, with people, in their capacity of being people. And what we, like these results that we saw is, of course, that AI is not a neutral facilitator, or that this kind of human facilitation, that you could not like disconnect these two, which is of course always like the hope of a lot of institutions, to just put AI into something and scale it up and everything's going to work perfectly. We had focused a lot this workshop, or this experience, on digital literacy, of being like very mindful about people asking questions about the technology, but we felt that there was a lack many times of understanding democratic literacy, like what do we mean with participation, and who is having the power in the room, and why is, that kind of power distribution was really interesting. Of course, transparency is essential for trust, and what we try to do there is to open up the system to show what kind of profiles were being used, that were augmenting the outputs, what data the LLM had been trained on, letting them decide which data sources they trust for it to actually use, and so on. And then, of course, that AI should never decide or give like a finished solution, but maybe help instead in asking more questions, or showing what is a divergent opinion from the group, to be able to discuss that further. So what does this all mean for the knowledge commons? Trying to make a loop. So we're already, of course, as both of you said, AI is already shaping how knowledge is accessed, produced, and trusted. They're, of course, not neutral infrastructures. They come within the democratic setting, also with the assumptions about speed and authority and consensus, that looking at other AI tools within this realm, this consensus building through AI is really high and often used, and something that's seen as very valuable. But this, of course, runs very counter to the messy, plural, and friction-rich nature of democracy. There is Audre Lorde quote of, "You will not dismantle the master with the master's tools," is, of course, a very valued or valid quote also in this. And to truly try to bring or build some kind of knowledge commons technology, I think we need that the technologies themselves slow down, not only in the design and development phase, but also in the implementation phase of always being able to question back what the technology is doing. Yeah, that's for me. Thank you.
Thank you. We already have a lot of questions here. I just wanted to make sure that you didn't misunderstand me before. It was very similar from the approaches and also the stances. I think, yes, it's interesting how maybe the framing through language differs. And I'm glad you jump in between bubbles so easily. Thanks for that, Elisabeth. Right, we had one question before the last input. Do you still want to raise? Okay, it's up to you. So then this here and here, yeah.
Yes, first, thank you very much for this. Has been super fascinating. I feel like I have too many questions. I could talk with each of you for like so many hours about everything you do. So I'm going to stick it to one question. So my background is in journalism. I host a podcast on open source hardware. And something that is on my mind is I completely agree with the mission of we need to make knowledge and access to knowledge open, you know, and also all kinds of knowledge and resources. But I guess what do we do about knowledge fabrication? How is there a way that openness as well can maybe help to mitigate what we see that? And I don't just mean fake news, I mean also fake science, fake research, all these kind of things.
I guess that it is absolutely I mean, openness will be the way to, I was thinking actually when she was speaking of an example. Now, if we look at how dangerous this knowledge fabrication is, I have seen the way people in my country are interacting with this grok on Twitter, and they are using it to attack or validate points against politicians. And it's very interesting, you know, because they kind of take it like this grok system, given the very limited knowledge that it has for a very limited population and all the cultural nuances, like it has been trained with whatever it could understood that was geolocated in Guatemala, right? And have seen how people are, you know, flagging the answers of a machine as the ultimate truth to attack political positions is precisely your point, you know, like, and I think that we have many problems with this, because one of the problems is that the best research that is being produced that could give us the most accurate answers is paywalled. And highly unlikely the latest, best knowledge is feeding the automated systems. So by default, most of the automated systems are giving us as an answer, you know, last 3 years old news when you ask in the super optimal case, you know, when we are asking about specific issues. So one problem is updating, you know, like the updating on key issues. It is not compatible with the profit models of the systems and with the market in general, with the systems. That's a primary point. The second is by digesting and processing this big, the hallucination problem has the verification of a hallucination of one of these systems takes a lot of time, effort, and expertise that might be dispersed in many places to contest. And so one of the things that is very critical is when a hallucination is you know, behind very important decision, imagine vaccines or imagine epidemiology control of that someone based an action, a rapid action into takes the basis and hallucination of a system. The consequences can be devastating, and especially if that decision comes from an authority that is recognized by citizens. You know, like one of the things that I have done with my staff and my developers is that they have to be transparent about the use of AI in whatever they do. I don't say like, you know, don't use ChatGPT, don't use this, don't use that. We are trying because of environmental reasons to limit the use, but I need to know if my developer did this piece of code using a machine and which system they use, because then I can trace back which repositories were used to feed the system in the best of the cases, you know, like I can detect the error in this. But I think that we will face a crisis of honesty among the heads of certain institutions that we used to trust. Precisely is a problem that it is just a time bomb waiting to explode, because I think that if people are not transparent about the use of you can, before you could say like, okay, I base my decision in this human expert and this paper that has been published. But if you know, like it's because I say so, because I'm the head of epidemiology of Vietnam or Honduras, and they do not disclose that the decisions are based in a hallucination, we are in serious trouble. And I think that openness in this way is being open about the use of certain system to, and it should be mandatory, you know, it should be like, it should have some degree of penalties even attached to it when you are a public servant, when you are in a position of power and your decisions are going to affect a lot of people. I think that the openness comes from the disclosure of this. And unfortunately, you know, like we need to create different systems, at least for the most pressing problems of our time, where the information, when we are transparent about the information used to build that automated model. As you were saying, you know, like we should use the tools that we have available. I am not opposed to, it would be like, for example, going back again to the epidemiology data situation. It would be great to have, you know, a small AI system that could get me through different scenarios. But it could be great that scientists in different country or in the country next door will access the data that I base my models on so as to determine errors if I made it. We don't have it in the AI systems today because data is guarded. So I think that openness by design solves the problem that you were saying. No, automatically, because it's a serious problem of speed of the spotting that it has been based in false information. But at least offers us tools to understand where is the error, or where is the malice, and if we adopt an open approach, if we adopt even by design in our institutions, but also a common practice that that decision makers have to disclose if any decision, if to take any decision or to prepare any public document, they use AI. Without, you know, like we cannot believe in the machines to, because humans are clever, and I have seen it with my staff. You know, they were say, "Did you write it?" Yes, I wrote it. Did you really write it? You know, like, and I passed the test. You know, like the test of because it was a very crazy document on the test if you have used any AI, and it said no. And then the staffer said like, "Okay, yes, I did. I mix a little bit of DeepSeek and a little bit of course, humans are very clever at hiding things, traces of the system. But the problem that I had in that moment, which is a problem that at other levels can be of terrible impact, is I need to know where this knowledge came from, you know. And I think that, you know, openness is the actual answer for this, because I cannot think of any other way to know, you know, to contest the source and offer counter arguments to an argument that has been, like, you know, fabricated away. I don't believe, like, you know, for that kind of things, technological solutions will be too costly and the technology moves too fast. But open practices, and in this case, first adopted by institutions and then being mandatory, I think that it is the solution that we can aspire for, because while not abandoning the idea of having a more robust commons, common knowledge system, because the other issue is how slow is good quality knowledge to get out of the paywall. Sorry, I had a...
Thank you very much. We have one more question there and then there.
Okay, thanks very much. Actually, Renata, you already answered partly my question, but actually my question was originally to Elizabeth, so maybe I can still ask it, because I think it's interesting to also maybe get the perspective from like the experiments you've done in several European cities. So for me, it's interesting to know a little bit more concretely, if you can give some, sorry for my horrible voice, if you can give some concrete examples of how you used AI or testing AI in your lab workshops and experiments. And I mean how, like, more concretely, because AI is like, when we say AI, I mean, it's like so many things. It's like question answering systems, okay? Like with my colleagues, I work in a research environment, we usually say, we hate the word AI, we just want to say math. Like, there are a lot of tasks that I want to use math for, you know, like that will make my everyday life easier. But then there's a lot of tasks, and democracy and kind of civic participation in my mind immediately was like red flag. Like, I don't want to use math in like civic participation. So if you can just give like one or two examples of like what kind of questions you were asking people to like work with when it comes to AI, or just to make it for me a little bit more concrete, because I really, right now, I'm like, no, math and democracy don't go together somehow in my in my mind.
Yeah, no, so I can explain a little bit what we used it for in the lab. But first I want to say that, and like, so in participation, we've been using a lot of different platforms, right? So we've had Decidim, we have Polis, we have, without any kind of like LLMs in that, or like some kind of like analyzing information in that form, but it's just like a platform. Every time we put any kind of technology with or without algorithm, AI systems within it, you're always substituting something in that process that would otherwise be completely human to human, facilitated and mediated and taken care of, and so on and so forth. So that was like a very important part for us to look at when we decided on what should this tool be doing and what should this tool try to substitute. And if you look right now how tools using AI in these kinds of settings are used, it's either like translating, so getting people to, with different language knowledges to be able to participate. Very often it is about creating consensus in what has been said, which is a really scary thing, I think, which is a lot of decision making being happening over there. What we wanted to use it for, so in this kind of a process, you usually have a topic. It was we chose a topic that we thought was engaging but not complex and speculative. So the question was, how should the EU facilitate a positive transition of the labor market during the AI era? Something that everybody feels connected to because everybody's scared, but you don't really know. And usually we would have 2 or 3 experts in the room that would try to say something. And that's what we wanted to use the LLM for, to be that expert in the room. And therefore it was trained on specific data sets that we had chosen. I mean, all of this is just like being in an experiment. So it was from newspaper articles, from peer-reviewed journal articles, and from policy documents. And then the people could then look at both, see the data, what kind of training data was used, but also say, like in Poland, they said, no, we cannot have any policy documents in there because we do not trust that. or in Spain, it was like, but we cannot have the newspaper articles in that because we cannot trust that. So it was very interesting parts and the discussions around that. So that was the experiment, and then there was, before this, a larger process of understanding each of the pieces of this demonstrator for them to be able to, to react to that as well.
But if I might add, I totally agree that we have to find new ways of addressing it without always using only AI and mystifying everything that's going on there, but specifying what exactly tasks do these systems, algorithmic-driven and machine learning-driven systems do, right? So in the back,
please
we
remind
have
me about the question.
yeah.
Oh, thank you. I'm Lambert, I'm a librarian, and I have a question mostly, I think, for Renata, but maybe also for the other panelists. So I was glad that you mentioned the shortcomings of open access and also mentioned Sci-Hub and all those matters of big commercial players slurping up the knowledge commons, so to say, for their AI models. So, and I'm wondering, what are our critical demands against copyright and copyright policies today? So is there some way, what we should ask for to fix the situation, to rebalance the situation? Just curious about your opinion on this.
Yeah, I think that there are many issues here, but the main issue is that content creators and knowledge creators are not getting the money and are not getting, like, the tools that they need to keep producing the high quality knowledge that we have. The ones that the intermediaries still are getting, like the gatekeepers of knowledge, like those who control the publishing process, those who control the access to journals and so on. We haven't passed that moment, but we have an additional grabber. So now even them have been, like, taken for a ride by the big AI companies that say, like, okay, we don't care about your rules. We have the power to extract everything that you have. You, gatekeeper, actually, we took the back door of the gatekeeper and extract everything of value from the systems. So I think that it's moment to revisit the incentives. Who funds knowledge, actually? Who funds knowledge production? Who gets the benefits? Which are the incentives? And to radically modify this, both shake the position of the extractor, which we will not be able to do it only through litigation. They are too powerful, or to legislation. They're true. It has to be like a big like challenging to the structure today, because as we have seen, is when you have all money and powers, it's very easy to crush litigation, and it is very easy to capture legislation. So I think that we need to really rethink the system and come to, but we need to do it fast. So I think that we need to do it by the slow way, by policy, but we also need to do it by practice. I like the idea of showing, not telling only, like showing that there are other viable models to generate a knowledge commons corpus that do not need to, with modified incentives, like it might be like not the open access model, it might not be the pirate model, it might be something absolutely different and something in between. We have seen very interesting results in, for example, reproducible research initiatives. We have seen, but there are like small examples. The thing that we need, like a big institution such as libraries, to look also inside. One of the things that blew my mind is that even if when you think open access, you think of a library. Libraries in most developed countries spend only like 20% or less on open access, and still are feeding the machine. 80% of the budget goes to closed. So keep the machine of the proprietary machine alive. So I guess that it will be a complicated process, a challenging process, but an urgent process I mean, that we need to take. Now is the crack in the system. Once the AI big companies get rid of this problem, it's too late. We have a window now.
I just also answer to that. I think that that we have had institutions in society that have created a lot of what we think of when we think about open access and knowledge productions, like libraries, right? And I think we have to, in this open moment of change, go back to what we had and what, like, these kinds of institutions. Now I'm thinking from more this democratic perspective again. We were good at creating community and we were good at creating trust. And I think this is a big issue, right? So how do we create trust again in anything while it's breaking down because it's like working the way it is? So I think looking back at when did institutions work and why do they work and how do they work? Like community centers, neighborhood centers, family centers, and neighborhood libraries, all of these institutions, we're good at that. And we've been just defunding them now for 30 years. But these are the ones that we have to come back to and reinvent. Of course, they're not going to be the same as in the 50s or 60s or 70s, but there's so much knowledge of how to do that, right? And not answering that question at all, but just these are the institutions that we have to go back to and revisit, I think, and not just think that there will be it will be fixed in a completely different way, because I think we have been right before, and to rethink.
Yeah, and also when we are talking about knowledge, the whole ecosystem of situated knowledge, experiential knowledge, by learning, by being there also in these ecosystems physically, is also something that we have to go back in recognizing. I totally agree with you. We have one last question. It's already lunchtime, but yeah, I know. Yes, it's him.
I find fascinating. I would like to spend a lot of time going with this conversation, and I find very interesting that we have like technology for social movements. We have a call for rebellion and a call for rebuilding trust with authorities, not necessarily, but I think it's important to realize that there is not such a thing as a single future, and there are multiple futures that will happen at the same time. And I think my generation is the kind of climate anxiety generation, but my kids are kind of climate fatigue. And I think in pair with openness and open knowledge, there should be more thought about kind of opportunity literacy, and how do we carry rebellion to new generations? What it used to be counterculture, now with capitalism, realism, Mark Fisher, and all that, there's this sense of newer generations younger than Greta Thunberg that there's nothing you can do to change. There's nothing you can do to actually affect the macro level or change policy and believe in policies. I come from Brazil, so trust in authorities, trust in institutions is never happened. The only trust there is that dominant classes believe that the state will protect their interests, sometimes with violence when needed. But my question is, how do we kind of ensure that this spirit of rebellion and the understanding that rebellion is probably useless, but still we need to keep trying to and be defeated, as I once wrote, but keep telling the story of our defeats and making sure that new generations still try to effect some change that will, in the words of Ailton Krenak from Brazil, will just postpone the end of the world, because the end of the world will come, but that we just live to another generation to keep telling these stories. And I think it's important to get back to the important stories of how openness had impact, or at least delayed and created friction, delayed the complete overtake of knowledge by capitalist corporations. But telling those stories to 15-year-olds who are watching TikTok is harder than it was in my generation. So my question is how to keep telling those stories and how to make sure that, you know, people who are born today will still have a chance to understand that they can rebel and do something about it, even without being productive.
Maybe it's something that would be nice to see from the social movement perspective.
Cool. Yeah, I think it's such a good question, and you know, apathy and giving up hope is really a huge problem that we face. Like, it's so easy to kind of disconnect. I think I would say that, yeah, I think there's something around defining success and failure. I don't think that there is going to be a point where, like, through our political activities that we get to this, like, future utopian state where we've won. I feel like it will be ongoing forever, and that there are points along the way where there are successes. There are points along the way where it's failure and like it feels like we're losing, but then it's like, what can we learn from those things? And through my experience as well, even I think if you look kind of politically at the track record of like the campaigns that we've been involved in, I'm not sure if a lot of them you could say that we won. Even with the Labour government now, it's not the Labour government that we want in the UK, and Corbynism was entirely defeated in a way, and then headhunted out of the party. But the experience of being involved in political action and the sense of agency that you get, I think, when you work together with other people, and whether that's addressing like bigger kind of political electoral problems, but also the kind of day-to-day like direct democracy and mutual aid and kind of prefigurative practice, like whether that's in co-ops or, you know, mutual aid groups or unions, and that feeling, like I do think that personally gives me so much hope and makes me feel this sense of agency. So I feel like with young people, it's about how you can encourage them maybe to get off TikTok and like and actually try doing things together, and then see how you can have these like little bubbles of utopia or like the world that you want, even in the wider structure of decline and collapse and fascism, basically.
I just want to share, I'm from Guatemala, so I follow Brazil a lot, and I've shared many of your sentiment. But you know, like, you will be surprised, because I was very surprised of a country I didn't give a damn. You know, I'm very familiar with, because my husband is from there, but also because I lived before that there in Serbia. I mean, Serbia, like, you know, post-Yugoslavia, very complicated. I mean, the same impression, you know, super alienated youth, completely on the telephones, you know, like, wow, what they are doing now. And the fascinating thing is that they are surprising us with different models of organization across political spectrum. I couldn't believe. They have a manifesto. You know, they are like right-wing, left-wing, centrist students like, you know, like mostly are like between 17 and 21, holding for months a protest that has 3 points, only three, a common agenda of 3 points that they are sticking to, and they have put the government at a crossroads. The government doesn't know what to do, because they targeted the point that will make the entire system of the country fail. And they say what it requires many times for these young people to act is a trigger that touches them so deeply, and that they find injustice so unacceptable. In this case was, you know, a construction that fell, in a roof that fell into by now 17 innocent people that were just waiting in the station. But that going, now they have the tools to go deeper and examine why this happened. And that triggered, since November, the country has been paralyzed. And it's amazing, you know, because what is showing me, like, you know, it moved me even to tears, because they were like, the level of granular self-organization, bottom-up that they have achieved. I think, like youth anywhere can do that now because they can inform themselves, question power, organize. And because of the social media, they can hold each other accountable. It's quite amazing. They were like, I was at New Year's and all the students were in the plaza and they moved so much. The other generations, the apathic generation of the parents and even the grandparents were around them, protecting them, like in this unity. So I guess that, denying that they will react well and that they will rebel will be denying that the new generations have this human nature that is very powerful. So do not give up.
I love that. Yeah, applause to that. I would say. Oh, it's such a tire to applause. No, but I really love it because you mentioned several times people are clever. History shows that we find ways to get out of misery in several and different, maybe more rebellion arts kinds of. Thank you so much. We would like to have some closing remarks, maybe.
I don't know if Elizabeth wants to share something about sources you generate hope from.
No hope there.
Well, then I think this was fantastic closing remarks, and thank you all so much for letting us learn from your processes, your perspectives, strategies, and also the reasons that you, or the places that you look to not drown in despair. And I'd say let's get something to eat, huh?
Stop. No, I have also close. No, but I really would like to continue these conversations in whatever way possible and maybe to come to a manifesto. So I take a lot with me from these insights and questions you raised. I find it very interesting that we have like 3 institutions that deal with these questions that are not higher education institutions. So how do we translate it back to our higher education institutions, that those questions is also a new challenge and a fascinating maybe task for the next months or years even. Thank you so much.